Alrighty, I'm going to kick everyone off and we're going to start at 6:01. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua Hodge, and I'm the Policy and Communications Manager here at Education Reform Now DC, and I will be your moderator for tonight. Tonight's event is co-sponsored by Education Reform Now DC and Decoding Dyslexia. ERN DC is a nonprofit organization fighting for just and equitable public education system in Washington, DC. And Decoding Dyslexia is a grassroots movement driven by DC families concerned about the limited access to educational interventions for students with dyslexia and other reading difficulties within our schools. We are excited to be bringing in the last day of Black History Month with this amazing event to discuss historical racism around literacy, the current reading crisis we're faced here in DC and across the nation, and to discuss solutions to solve this issue urgently. And with that, let's begin. And throughout the event, I ask the audience to place their questions in the chat so they can be answered naturally throughout the event. Now for our amazing panelists, if you'd like to please introduce yourself and what you do and why you're so passionate about literacy. Jess, if you can kick us off, that'd be awesome.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jess Giles. I'm the State Director of Education Reform Now DC. I am so excited to be here on this dynamic panel of Black women talking about literacy and how important it is. I began this work as a child care provider. I come from a family that believes in the strength and the importance of education and how it's a gateway to a brighter future. So I am passionate about ensuring that other students have an opportunity to achieve their wildest dreams. And so again, excited to be here and to be talking about this important issue. Sonia next.
No.
Hello, my name is Sonia Thomas. I'm the Executive Director for Nashville Propel. The Propel stands for Parents Requiring Our Public Education System to Lead. Is exactly what we're going to do. We are an organization for Black and Brown parents, by Black and Brown parents, and we particularly target those groups. We organize those parents, and we develop them into powerful parent leaders to ignite a movement, y'all, that demands an equitable education for all students in Nashville public education. So glad to be here. I do this work is because I never want another parent to feel the way that I felt when I realized that my son was not receiving the education that he needs and deserves.
Next, can Carla, you introduce yourself, please? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carla Reed Wood. I am a longtime special ed advocate and as well as a mental health advocate and co-founder of Decoding Dyslexia DC. Decoding Dyslexia is a grassroots organization of community stakeholders, parents, families, teachers. We focus on advocacy for reading for all readers. And first, I'm a parent, and I have had children that have had struggles with education, and I've learned a lot of stuff, and I just wanted to get out and help other parents to make it easier for them than it was for me.
And then lastly, can Sheila, you introduce yourself, and we'll go to Nia last.
Yes, circumstances, I had to have my camera off when I speak.
Sheila will be able to fix her sound. Good evening, everybody. I am Nia West Bay. My professional hat that I wear is I'm the Director of Youth Policy at the Center for Law and Social Policy, or CLASP, in Washington, DC. That's a national anti-poverty policy advocacy organization. But the hat that I'm wearing tonight primarily is as a parent and longtime youth worker and youth advocate, and to particularly speak with you all about my experience with my daughter who has dyslexia. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all so much for such an awesome panel here. We cannot wait to hear your amazing insights around literacy and around dyslexia here in DC and throughout the United States. With that, I'll jump right into our line of questions. So let's get started by putting this discussion in a little bit of context. Literacy gaps by race existed long before the COVID-19 pandemic due to historical racist policies. Jessica, can you expound on these, the current state of literacy, and share what the root causes of literacy deficiencies are?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Josh. Thanks for the question. So, I think our struggles with education and literacy really starts from the founding of this country, where Black Africans were enslaved here in America by white folks, and also forbidden to learn how to read and write. And this went on for over 200 years, it being illegal, and it was punishable by fines and prison and death. And so we know that for many decades, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia all passed anti-literacy laws banning enslaved people to read and write. And this was all legal. This was all made legal. And also, states in the North also barred from Black students from going to school. And so this was something that I keep saying the word legal because I think that's really important as we try to make it, as we try to create inequities within our system and make it to right historical wrongs and make sure that we are opening opportunities for students to gain literacy. And so Blacks really did what we've done since the beginning of time, which is made a way out of no way. And that means they opened up schools for African Americans. And in 1870, right here in DC, Dunbar High School was the first high school in the nation for Black students. And so this seems like a long time ago, but even in my own history, when I think about it, my grandparents, super sharp, worked hard. They were sharecroppers, and they were only able to get an elementary school education because they had to work and provide for our very large family. And so this wasn't that long ago, and the historic injustices of our racist past and our racist present continues to impact literacy and education in DC, across the nation. We look at the NAEP, the exam, which is actually being conducted now in DC, but across the nation, only 35% of all fourth grade students performed at or above the NAEP proficient level on the reading assessment in 2019. And I see that low percentage rate being directly connected with the racist past. Black students have scored the lower than all other student groups by race, with American Indian and Alaskan Natives right behind Black students, and students by other categories were also scoring lower, English learners and students with disabilities. And so we know that when children are not reading proficiently, they're much more likely to drop out or fail and not graduate from high school. And that they are 4 times more likely to drop out when they don't read proficiently. And we know that during the pandemic, we've had worsening reading levels. McKinsey study predicted that students would be months behind in math and reading. and with worsening results for students of color. And we have studies here in DC done by Empower K-12 in November, which said that there was a 18 percentage point drop from 2019 to spring 2021 in K through 2 end of year level reading assessments. And so, you know, the city has poured a lot of resources in DC. We've poured a lot of resources into literacy, but we still, 70% of our students aren't proficient in reading by 4th grade. 70%, and that was based in 2019. I fear that that is going to be much worse when we get the scores back in this year. OSSI put out a comprehensive literacy plan. They've applied to the Department of Ed and received a $16 million grant. The mayor has invested $41 million into high impact tutoring to help with literacy, but we know that there is more that can be done. And so when we think about the root causes of the deficiencies around literacy, we think about, you know, the underfunding of public schools, exclusionary discipline, the cost of childcare, students just having kind of a late start learning literacy, you know, child find policies where students are identified later, food deserts, where we have a food desert in Ward 7, where I am right now. Homelessness, redlining, housing covenants, all of this impacts a child's ability to show up and ready to learn and to be on grade level, especially with regards to literacy. But we also know that with decades of research that when educators are not taught structured literacy, which we've learned is critical to ensuring that students learn these basic literacy skills at an early age. And structured literacy is explicit, research-based instruction in beginning reading. And it contains 5 foundational elements that are critical to ensuring reading comprehension. And that's phonological awareness, sound symbol association, symbol instruction, morphology, and semantics. And so we have various folks in DC that are doing some incredible work. We have one person here who's been helping students learn how to read, and we've got some fantastic organizations both here in DC and across the nation who are fighting for our children to be able to read on grade level. And we know that structured literacy is one way that we can go about closing those gaps. Mississippi really did a lot of important work when they decided to have an early learning plan and implement that with structured literacy, with science of reading years ago. And they've seen an 11-point increase on the NAEP 4th grade reading assessment because of it. So those are all of the factors that I would say going into the reading crisis that we have in DC here and across the nation.
Thank you so much for that, Jess, and placing our conversation through a historical lens and background pre-pandemic. For those students who are treading water before, are currently in jeopardy of drowning now without the correct interventions. Nia, can you share what you and your own child's experience has been with literacy here in DC?
Sure. Thanks, Josh, for that question. So when you take all the historical context that Jessica is talking about, right? Reading is really important to us. Like, this is something that we value in our families, in our home. We have books everywhere, all around the house. We consider ourselves readers. So, and my youngest daughter, who's now 11 years old, you know, we've been reading to her every night, sometimes multiple times a day, probably since she was in the womb. So when she got to 1st grade, it suddenly became clear that she was having trouble learning how to read, because she would be assigned to, you know, she would have homework assignment where she was supposed to read aloud for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. And we try to read together, and she would only want to read books that she'd heard a lot of times, that she basically had memorized, right? Or, you know, I noticed things that struck me as strange about how she was trying to read words, where she wouldn't notice the letters in the middle of the word. She only seemed to see the beginning and the end. So, we spent the fall of first grade getting her eyes checked and, just trying to figure out, was there something going on that, something physiological going on? Nothing. So we finally get to January of first grade and are like, hey, it seems like something's not right here. Can we get her evaluated? And to make a very long story short, had to fight with her school for 6 months to get the evaluation. They finally did it on like the second to last day of first grade, something like that. And lo and behold, after being told by all these teachers and all these administrators and all these experts that basically we were being extra, we were comparing her to her brother, we were doing too much, this was normal, it would all work itself out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lo and behold, when they actually decide to evaluate her, she comes up as eligible for services for specific learning disability and reading, which is the term, at least in DC, and I know in many places of the country, they use on IEPs instead of dyslexia. So, and this was after we had paid out of pocket for interventions that the school was not providing to her. After having to get lawyers involved, shout out to Advocates for Justice in Education DC, an amazing advocacy organization that helped us through this. After I spent hours of my time where I was supposed to be at my job, emailing back and forth with the lawyer, drafting emails, emailing back and forth with the school, going up to the school, meeting with different people. And the thing that had happened to my daughter while all this was going on was that this was having mental health impacts. A child who had always loved school suddenly didn't want to go anymore. We started getting calls from the school nurse in the middle of the day saying that she had headaches or that she had stomach aches. And we go check on her, there's actually nothing physically wrong with her. It was the stress that she was feeling around trying to learn to read, around feeling like she wasn't smart, around feeling like she wasn't good as other kids because she wasn't catching on. And the thing that the light switch that flipped as soon as she was identified and started receiving services is that those mental health pieces got fixed first. And in fact, in retrospect, I figured out afterwards, my daughter had stopped sleeping through the night when she started going to school after sleeping through the night for several years. She didn't start sleeping through the night again until second grade when she started getting these services. So the experiences that kids have when they're having trouble learning to read is not only a reading issue, but it's a mental health issue for kids. And when schools are resisting and fighting with parents just to get the kid evaluated, I was fortunate to have the type of job and to have the resources that would allow me to be emailing back and forth with lawyers and going up to the school, that would allow me to pay out of pocket for interventions for 6 months while we waited for the school to finally decide to do something, that let me pay out of pocket for a diagnostic evaluation, because what the school did was not diagnostic, to make sure that she actually got a diagnosis of dyslexia. And what I'm saying is it shouldn't be that hard for anybody. And to get back to Jessica's point about systemic issues, who are the parents who are least likely to have the resources, financial and time, to be fighting with schools about this? It's Black parents. And so all I kept saying to my child's school was, my child was relatively well behaved. She wasn't really bothering anybody. If she had, maybe they would have given her some more attention. But how many other kids do you have floating around this school that their parents maybe are not going to push back as hard or don't have time to push back as hard or take your word that you're the experts? And if we had done what y'all said, she would have floated around here till fourth grade, and then maybe y'all would have done something. But my child is also a testament to what can happen when you get the right type of intervention. I know that the pandemic was really difficult for everybody, particularly for families of kids with disabilities, particularly for families of kids who are struggling. But the blessing in disguise that it was for my family was I got to see what they were doing with my child and that it wasn't the right thing. And then advocate for her to get the actual structured literacy instruction that she needed. And she came out of the pandemic reading on grade level for the first time. Like, these issues can be addressed with the right resources and the right type of instruction. But it can't be this hard to get kids the help that they need.
Thank you so much for your perspective, Nia, and of your child as well, too. I feel as though that's a story that many families also face, and which will help bridge the gaps in our literacy struggles currently in DC and throughout the country. And that segues us into perfectly our next question. In education, policy drives practice. Sheila and Carla, what are some proven solutions or legislation recommendations you believe would help advance student literacy?
Okay. Do you mind if I give a little bit about myself first? Since my
Of
mic.
course.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sheila Carr, and I am a wife, mom, grandmother, and I'm also a person that did not find out that I had dyslexia until I was 40 years old. And then it explained a whole lot of my issues that I had. So why am I here fighting? To make sure that no one else ever has to go through the pain and anguish that I have had to go through. So dyslexia, which is a reading difficulty, runs in families. So when I look back at my grandmother had it, but nobody knew what the title was. I have it, my daughter has it, I have a grandson that has it. And saying all of that, since I only had 3 minutes, one of the quotes that I came across doing a little bit of this research was students who are struggling the most in reading are where they were almost 30 years ago now. The solutions have been obtained in a couple of states, I think, that I like the most is Mississippi. In Mississippi, in 2013, Mississippi continued its marathon with the goal of improving literacy outcomes for all children. Like a marathon runner, their training spanned a couple of years and included intensive teacher training, coach support for the teachers, and redefining instructional practices. The marathon yielded notable gains in student outcome. Mississippi boosted its ranking from 49th in 2013 to 29th in 2019. Prior to the legislation and the state investment, influential stakeholders, including Walkdale Reading Institute, advocated for literacy instruction rooted in a fundamental reading skills, including phonemic awareness, phonics instructions, reading fluency, vocabularies. These actions in the early 2000s created a strong foundation, significant change to come in the reading instruction in the following decade. Ensuring teachers are ready on day one, along with early efforts to embed the simple view of reading into Mississippi schools, the Barkdale Reading Institute noted that another component of reading instruction was the educators. We have to get our teachers ready. The colleges are not doing it. You have reading teachers who leave colleges, and I'm talking about big name schools, who don't know anything about dyslexia. How? And they, at least 25% of the reading issues in this country. So we must make sure that the colleges and the reading people, that they can be trained so when they come out into our schools, they are ready, as well as they should educate the educators that are there now. And in closing, I will say that building the capacity of educators and parents will make this a success. Thank you.
Hey, hi. I want to just add a little bit to amen everything that Sheila said, but I also wanted to say that we have to remember that reading is not natural. It's a skill. It's something we created, and it's a skill that has to be taught. So kids aren't just going to like by osmosis learn how to read. There are roughly 40% of children will learn to read no matter how poorly the instruction is. They'll just get it. And that's part of the reason that methods that aren't very good have lasted for so long, because a lot of kids actually do learn to read. But I said 40%, that leaves 60% of our kids for whom the inappropriate methods of instruction don't work. And you have about 20% of kids who actually have a reading disability, and those kids need specific specialized instruction, intervention by highly trained teachers. And that leaves us with the other 40% of kids. If we continue to use methods like cueing, which is basically guessing, those techniques don't get the kids very far. And for those kids, they will become functionally illiterate. And those students, as well as students with who actually have reading learning disabilities, need the kind of structured literacy intervention, or not even an intervention, instruction that Jessica was talking about. So if we teach structured literacy to all the kids, then the kids who would get it anyway, the 40%, the kids who won't get it unless we provide structured literacy, and then it works as well for kids who have actual reading disabilities. Then we get all the kids. We don't leave 60% behind. So we need, with the structure, kids read to learn to read pre-K to third, and then after that, they're reading to learn. So for the pre-K through three, we need to be doing screening, we need to provide structured literacy, and we need to provide the appropriate intervention for the kids who actually have reading disability. And then for our 4th through 12th grade, we need to train teachers to be able to recognize when the student is struggling with reading and be able to adjust the instruction method. They don't have to dumb down the content, but they need to adjust the instruction method for students who are struggling with reading, and provide all the kids with the accommodations they need if they're struggling with reading, as well as assistive technology. There's a lot of assistive technology that can help struggling readers that's actually free. And we need to do the same with adults, because we have a lot of adults now who come through the system and weren't taught to read. And as you can imagine, if you can't read as an adult, what functioning in today's world is like. You're going to have problems with accessing healthcare. You're going to have problems accessing housing. You're going to have problems with employment. And as Jessica said, you're more at risk for entering the criminal justice system. So I just want to tell everybody within earshot, please advocate to the politicians, the elected officials, anybody who's handling the money, and tell them that eradicating literacy is worth the cost, because the downstream effect to society is just exponential, and it helps everybody, and it's worth it.
Thank you so much for your comments, Carla and Sheila. They are directly in line and on point in saying that teachers must be trained in structured literacy for free. This should not be coming out of their own personal budget. This should be free and easy and accessible for all teachers here in DC and throughout the country. And as we recognize, nothing can be done without our great educators. Phaedra, can you share how KIP DC is implementing this legislation and advancing literacy interventions within your schools? As well as, can you introduce yourself as well too? Thank you.
Sure, yes. I'm Phaedra Boyd. I'm an elementary literacy coach with KIP DC. And my why is to help students obtain the foundational reading skills that they need to help them become better fluent readers, who then will grow up to be critical thinkers. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing here at KIP DC. This year, our school adopted a science-based reading program for our pre-K through 4th grade schools. And since the adoption, kind of speaking to what Sheila has been saying and Carla have been saying, we trained all of our staff with professional development around the science of reading. We knew that with implementing a new program that we were going to have to make sure that our teachers were educated around that program as well. It's really helped our teachers with being able to explicitly instruct our students and implement the new program across all the schools. So we're using a diagnostic tool that assesses all students at the beginning of the year, progress monitors them, and then tests again at the middle and end of the year. And we are able to track their progress. So we're excited about the shifts that we made this year. There's still more work to be done, but we're really proud of where we are currently and trying to do what's necessary for our students to grow more with reading.
Thank you so much, Phaedra. And those interventions are crucial for teachers and educators to be able to provide that great literacy training for our students. And I thank you for that as well. States are receiving historic amounts of funding to address COVID-related learning loss in schools. Sonia, how is Nashville, Tennessee spending these funds to address literacy gaps? And what would you like to see happen in Nashville from a policy perspective to not only move literacy to pre-pandemic levels, but to levels that are better than current education standards?
Thank you for asking. And as I sit and I listen to you guys who are 600 miles away from me, I hear more of the same than the status quo. It's amazing how our stories sound just alike. And here we are, the tail end of Black History Month, where we celebrate the success of our people in 2022, still talking about children being able to read. If nothing else, we should be teaching children how to read. They have the right to be taught how to read. And it grieves my spirit. See, one story is it's bad. Two is a trend. Thousands is a crisis. And we have a crisis on hand. And so you asking me about funding here in Nashville. We are getting historic amounts of money. They are making it rain for those of you out there listening. I don't know if you listen to rap, but they are making it rain. And what they're doing is using stopgap programs. I often wonder what the next excuse is going to be as to why children are not being taught how to read. And what I see is people making excuses, kicking the can down the road, and bullying all of us. That's what I see. 99% of all people can be taught how to read. We're talking about that 1% who has severe disabilities, but 99%. Do we hear that? 99% of all people can be taught how to read. It is difficult. It's not something that is natural for the brain, but 99% of all people can be taught how to read. So we've got to develop a moral compass here, guys. We've got to develop a moral compass. This is a human rights, a civil rights. This is a life and death conversation we're having. These are children's lives. These are adults that we have put into the workforce. And I often say that this country goes to war. They don't leave their dead behind on the battlefield. But we have left countless amount of people behind here in this country. We have put adults on streets in DC and in Nashville it's not their fault. So what we got to do, we got to hold people accountable. And in Nashville Propel is here to do just that. Parents are the only ones who will hold the systems accountable. The systems will protect themselves. The system protectors is what I call. That's what they were set up to do. And as Jessica went through the history, that old system is being protected by Black folk and white folk. Yeah, I'm gonna call it out. I'm here to tell the truth and shame the oppressor. And so what we got to do is hold people accountable. Just today, I talked to someone from our central office about literacy, and I explained to him that Tennessee has developed Reading 360 and some different laws around literacy. We've got a 3rd grade retention law here that is set to go forward. And right now, we are unable to tell the difference between a struggling reader and a reader who is receiving poor instruction. And what I found is my son was receiving poor instruction, like many people, like myself. He does not have dyslexia. But I fight for those who have dyslexia because they have a right to be taught how to read. And so we're building a movement of parents here in Nashville who will hold the system and its protectors accountable. So number one, that's what we got to do. We've got to understand that everybody on this call, when we leave here, we got to go and make sure that every parent knows their power. That's the work that we are all assigned to do and what we have to do. I am not dependent on the system. I have no faith in the system who has failed us for many decades. I am so sorry. Say what you want, but I am a struggling reader. And I heard the young lady who was on here, might have been Sheila, who said her grandmother, her daughter, her grandchild, that's generations of Black folk who have been left on the battlefield only to fend for themselves. And so parents, I want to inspire you to take matters in your own hands. That's number two. Fight for your children and other children. Fight, learn, get an understanding of how the system operates around you, of the history that we were talking about on here. And let's develop ways to take care of our children ourselves. And I know that sounds harsh, but when I look at Nashville, who has a zip code with the highest incarceration rate in the nation, who feeds the school to prison pipeline boastfully, I say to every parent on the side of my voice, take matters into your own hands. We've all been betrayed on this call by the system. And mind you, like, we want great educators, right? I love me some great educators, y'all. I have friends who are educators, but when we're talking about a system that won't even give scalpel lessons to its surgeons, meaning the colleges and the universities that they attend, our teachers, they're not even equipped. They're not even equipping the teachers to do what they need to do. I also spoke to some educators today who are not getting the professional development that they need. I just believe that people go to bed at night and wake up wanting to be good people and do what's right by children. But I also believe by 12 noon, when we know that there's a science to reading. We know what works. See, this is not all the way brand new. By 12 noon, we should all be ready to fight. At nighttime, we all should be losing sleep. I'm angry, and I think that all parents, number 3, need to get angry. Be angry like Sonia. Be angry like Phaedra and Nia. Be angry like Carla. Be angry like Josh. Josh, when I first met you, I could tell you was angry. And ain't nothing wrong with being angry. Ain't nothing wrong with it. So that's what I want to leave with parents as a solution, because we have states that have laws and money and programs. They're still not testing our children for dyslexia. They're still not using the money. They buying Louis Vuitton bags and red bottom shoes and sports cars. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Sonia, for being willing to share just such in-depth, just overall responsibility for the literacy crisis in DC and throughout the country. Thank you so much for that. That was amazing and beautiful. And that directly leads us into our last question. We all have a shared responsibility as families, as schools, as educators, and community members to advocate for policies and legislation that will better student outcomes. For everyone here on this panel, can you name one thing or things that you are currently doing to help get involved, help improve student literacy? And with that question, I'll also answer first myself. How I first got involved in helping improve student literacy. I used to live back at home in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I actually used to volunteer at the age of 12 at a transitional home for families who had experienced homelessness called Mary's Place. At the time, my family was extremely low income ourselves. However, helping students has always been so important to me and helping members of my community. I remember many days where I used to walk with my older sister and my mom, probably about 3 miles because we didn't own a car, to go help improve student literacy by reading to students who were in grades K-5 and helping assist with homework help too. Those practices that I did with my family at the age of 13, now being 23 years old, I still conduct homework help and reading help for students who live here in my apartment building, having just moved from Minnesota, because improving student literacy and student education has always been so important to me and my family. Sonia, can you say how you've been helping improve student literacy and educational outcomes?
So in Nashville, Propel we're developing our parents, we're building their knowledge. A lot of parents don't know, like many of us on here, we knew something was wrong. We knew that something wasn't quite right, but we just could not pinpoint. And so what we do is develop parents' knowledge base. Like you got to be in the know, right? You got to get an understanding, and any Bible readers and all that get an understanding. And I always say that parents need to get an understanding. And I got a friend that said it all the time, Thomas Driver. But we want to make sure that they understand how powerful they are as parents. Many of us go to meetings and it's 6 of them across the table, one of us, and they tell us there's nothing wrong with our children, that to read to them for 30 minutes, they didn't go to bed on time, little Ray acting up. Damn lie, excuse my language. What we know is they're getting poor instruction. And so we need to make sure that parents understand the science. They understand the difference between a struggling reader, whether or not their child has a disability. They need to know their rights. They need to know in this system how to even ask to have their children evaluated. If you don't say it a certain way, they'll ignore you and say that you didn't ask them right. So we're teaching them about the landscape of education. We do that through a 6-week fellowship. We're also building a movement amongst our young people. Just today, I talked to some magnet school students who were studying social movement. And some of them are interested in dyslexia. They don't have dyslexia themselves. They go to a school that's one of the top schools in this nation. But even them, they're realizing that the schools around them and people like myself don't have the same opportunities they have. So we have to make sure that people understand that this is a whole movement. This is not a onesie-twosie advocacy thing. This is a whole movement of people, in particular Black people. And so it is the civil rights movement of this generation. And we have to make sure that we're teaching. And that's what we're doing right here in Nashville. And we get up every day to make sure that that happens. And shout out to my team of 7, my organizing, program development, and operations managers. Shout out to them for the work that they do. I cannot do this work by myself. And so a movement of parents and grandparents is what we have in Nashville in order to make sure that there's change. So we're pushing those who make decisions. We're humanizing. We are telling the story. There's a danger in a single story. We're making sure that the stories of parents and children are heard. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Sonia, as that movement needs to be pushed and heard throughout DC and throughout the country in totality. by everyone. We all have a joint responsibility in helping improve student literacy. Carla and Sheila, you both are up for next.
Yes, Sonia, yes, Sonia, yes, that's what I'm talking. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm trying to control myself. But you know what? I'm
Don't.
on a mission for God. I have said that and I will say it again. DC, we got a law passed through the grace of God with parents. I'm a parent. She's a parent. The other lady that's a parent. The other one was the educator with the dyslexia that brought us all together. And you know what people would say? Sheila, you're not going to get a hearing. I got a hearing. Sheila, that bill's not going to pass. The bill passed. Sheila, your bill's not going to, they're not going to fund it. It was fully funded, fully funded. So I want to tell the other parents out there, even when somebody turn you around at that school, go to those school board meetings, go to the city council, whatever your government level is, and tell your story. Somebody's going to hear it and somebody's going to come walk with you so that you can get what you need to get for your child. So just because they say no, no. And let's make it perfectly clear. All you have to say at a school is that you want your child evaluated. You don't have to do the SST or nothing else, and put it in writing and get them to sign off. And they have a certain amount of days, 90 days or a little less, to get it done. Just want to put it out there.
Thank you so much, Sheila. And I agree, we cannot take no for an answer, as that would be letting down students all across the country. Jessica Giles, what do you got for me?
Oh, what can you say? What can you say after Sonia and Sheila and so many, Nia and Phaedra and you and your experiences advocating for literacy? But I would just offer equipping educators with free and accessible training in structured literacy. I think that is a really important step to ensuring that all of our students, particularly our Black students, are given the tools to be able to read, and pound on those doors. Like you said, the road is paved with good intentions, but as long as we have to hold our elected officials accountable to ensuring that their plans are actually implemented, because we love a good plan. Policymakers love putting together a good plan. And then you'll be, 3-5 years later wondering what happened, where's the funding for it, how is it actionable? And so finding other folks in your community who are really passionate about this issue is going to be really important. And families are the backbone of this advocacy movement. So I just, so appreciative of the work of you, Sonia, and Carla and Sheila and Nia, for really spearheading this movement in literacy.
And I completely agree with you there, Jess. Now is not the time for plans anymore. Now is the time for action. We've heard enough plans. Phaedra, what do you think? How do you help bolster student literacy?
I was just thinking as I was listening, them being parents and, us educators were like on the ground, like we're with the kids all the time. So we got a lot of change this year because our teachers spoke up and decided that we needed to do better. They were seeing that the kids were not responding to the instruction that they were given. So just for the educators out there listening, the parents are fighting, but we have to continue fighting too. What we see isn't working for our children and our babies. We have to make noise and go to our principals and our leaders and demand change. So just for those in the schools, we can also, advocate for our kids as well.
100% agree there, Phaedra. We all have a role into helping improve student literacy, from parents to teachers themselves. And lastly, Nia, how do you help improve student literacy?
I think there are 3 things I want to share to close, at least 2 of which echo things that other people have said. The first is know your rights. Your baby deserves to have access to whatever resources they need that will allow them to get an education. And the laws are actually pretty tight. They hand you a document called procedural safeguards. Every time you have a meeting with the special education or intervention team at the school, in there is everything you need. It's annoying, it takes a lot of time, but all your rights are in there. Follow through, because, you know, like Sheila said, if you say you want an evaluation, they're supposed to give you an evaluation and they have a certain amount of time to do it. If they don't, then there's next steps all the way through the process. Make sure you know your rights. Number 2, use your voice. I actually met the folks from Decoding Dyslexia because I showed up to testify at a city council hearing in DC by myself. And they had brought a whole crew. But after I testified, they were like, hey, do you want to join our crew? And I've been on the email list ever since. You as an individual parent, crew or no crew, show up where you need to show up, use your voice to speak on behalf of not only your own child, but other children in the whole community. We got to hold our whole community. And the third thing I'll say that I think is different is I've been really interested to see the levels of stigma around learning disabilities and dyslexia, and the amount of shame that people associate with special education. I will tell any and everybody that my daughter has dyslexia and that she receives special education services, because I firmly believe the way we reduce stigma is to talk about it. I talk about it to her. I talk about it with my family. I talk about it with her friends' parents. I talk about it with anybody who's listening, because the only way we make it so that children who are going through this do not feel a burden is if we can lift this stigma and make it known that it is okay that your mind works a little differently. And that way that your mind works a little bit differently is what, in my daughter's case, makes her an awesome artist and an awesome graphic designer and an amazing storyteller and an awesome friend and a deep thinker. It makes her all kinds of other things that are beautiful and make her who she is. So we're not going to have no hangups about saying that she has a little bit of a harder time learning how to read or doesn't read as fast as everybody else, because we can work through that with the right supports. But we're not going to be ashamed about it, because that is not anybody's shame, except maybe these systems that set it up that way.
Absolutely, Nia. I completely agree. Reducing stigmas around mental health and special needs should be done immediately, as there is no issue in having special needs and learning. However, they need to be met and need to be addressed so that all students can learn fairly and equitably throughout DC and throughout the country. And with that, that was amazing to hear the perspectives and insights of so many amazing leaders and dedicated members of education and literacy community. Thank you all for the great questions that you put in the chat throughout and taking the time from your busy schedules to come listen to us speak today. We as a panel have a final request for all of you to ensure change can actually come from this discussion. We ask that everyone here go onto their Twitter pages and say the following. One second as I put it in the chat. One moment. You all go. By using this tweet, we can continue our advocacy to push forward literacy in DC and throughout the country, as policy is what drives change in our education landscape. And now with that, we're all complete with our literacy panel today. However, I will leave the next 90 seconds for anyone who might have any question for our amazing panelists here. Thank you all so much and have an amazing night.
Josh, I think we had one question actually in the chat from Nikki.
All right, Nikki has a question for Phaedra. First off, thank you so much for being here. What are some barriers that educators have when learning structured literacy?
Barriers to learning it. I think it's new. It's kind of, there's not a lot of like material on it right now, like books for you to read and things. So it's a big shift from balanced literacy, which more people are accustomed to. So I think the barriers really probably come from your school or your district, unfortunately, not being able to give educators the professional development around it and how it benefits the kids. So those are your barriers. I like to join various Facebook groups and learn all about structured literacy. But I think change is coming, but I think it's going to be very slow. So those are just some of the barriers. There's a lot of barriers right now with structured literacy though.
Thank you so much, Phaedra, for that response. And those barriers are what we're right now trying to tackle to ensure every teacher has access to free and easy, accessible structured literacy education. And thank you so much, Nikki, for your question as well. And then last opportunity for the remaining audience. Does anyone have any final notes or questions for our amazing panelists here?
Can I add something, Josh?
Of course.
I just want to encourage everybody to contact your elected, do all the stuff that everybody said, contact the school, let them know your kids need services and demand what they have a right to. But in addition, please contact your elected officials and tell them this matters to you, that this is a voting issue for you, and you will be paying attention to what they do and to make sure that they put the funding in so that all kids can read.
Also, making sure you contact your your House of Representatives and your senator, because they send it back down and they must respond to them. Where they won't respond to you, they will respond to them.
Thank you so much, Carla and Sheila. And then just to answer the last question there from Allison in the chat, but what if my child's school, a top DCPS school in Ward 2, refuses to say dyslexia and denies that children have it? Also denies a child fine. What can a parent do to help mitigate that and actually get the tools and resources from the school that they actually need?
I dropped this in the chat, but that is where Advocates for Justice and Education was really helpful to me. And again, that's what the procedural safeguards say to do. If they turn you down, then you can appeal it. And so I called them and did an intake, and again, connected us with a lawyer who mostly just helped me craft emails back and forth with the school administration. But they have to do it. So, just don't let up, keep the pressure up, call AJE, they'll help you out.
Thank you so much, Nia, for that connection of resources. And with that, I'd like to say happy Black History Month to everyone and have an amazing night. And thank you so much to our amazing panelists. Thank you. Everyone take care now and have a good night.